Welcome back for all of you. Bienvenue de retour après ce déjeuner. I hope you enjoyed your lunch and I hope you enjoyed the workshop at the end of the morning. Le travail des workshops à la fin de la matinée, on va y consacrer une bonne partie de ce milieu d'après-midi avec la restitution par les rapporteurs des différents panels, différents workshops, des travaux, des discussions qui ont eu lieu en fin de matinée. On aura le temps, ils vont venir s'installer dans un petit instant, d'en discuter avec eux. Et puis nous avons un certain nombre de prises de parole prévues jusqu'à la fin de ces 2 journées consacrées à la lutte contre les violences sexuelles faites aux femmes dans des situations de fragilité particulière. Je vous demande d'applaudir pour cette nouvelle après-midi de travail et pour restituer les travaux des workshops, les différents rapporteurs de ces workshops qui seront interviewés et leur prise de parole sera animée par la chercheuse Marie Forestier que nous allons accueillir dans une petite poignée de secondes, après le jingle, me dit-on. Marie Forestier, the stage is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the closing session, Uniting for Impact. My name is Marie Forestier. I'm a researcher focusing on women in conflicts issue, and it's an honor to moderate this closing session that is concluding a very unique event that was designed to be centered on survivors and centered on solutions. These past 2 days, we've heard moving testimonies, thought-provoking ideas, and very concrete initiatives. And during this panel, we will discuss how we can build on the spirit of this event to support further knowledge sharing, innovation, and funding for promising initiatives. So what we've heard these past 2 days has focused very much on access to healthcare, access to justice, and access to support for survivors-led initiatives. And we will discuss with our panelists how to build on these best practices and what solutions can be implemented now to move forward. So let me introduce you briefly our speakers. So first to my right, Professor Mohamed Yunus, who is the founder of Grameen Bank and the Nobel Prize 2006. Then Mrs. Nadine Tounassi, the leader Policy and Research Working Group Survivors Speak Out, Freedom from Torture. Mrs. Esther Dingmans, director of the Dr. Denis Mukwege Foundation. Mrs. Céline Bardet, founder and president of We Are Not Weapons of War. And Mr. Philip Grant, director of Trial International. So first we will hear about the workshop restitution, and we will start with Philip Grant. Can you please tell us about the key messages regarding justice?
Bonjour tout le monde. Le panel sur la justice a entendu 2 témoignages de survivants très émouvants sur leur quête de justice difficile, confuse, parfois absurde, en Ukraine et au Kosovo. 2 dossiers dont l'un n'avance pas et l'autre qui a été rejeté par la Cour suprême du Kosovo, la seule affaire de violence sexuelle qui ait jamais occupé les tribunaux de ce pays. Les 2 témoignages ont mis en avant le rôle fondamental des ONG et de la société civile, tout en constatant tristement que sans une prise de responsabilité de la part des États, la justice était impossible. Alors les 3 représentants des ONG présentes se sont évidemment engouffrés dans la brèche. Oui, ont-ils dit en chœur, certaines choses se passent, les mentalités évoluent, des discours forts sont tenus, des procès et des condamnations ont parfois lieu. Mais non, les États n'en font pas encore assez. Il faut donc renforcer notamment les structures permettant de poursuivre les violences sexuelles en conflit, en établissant et en renforçant ce que l'on appelle les War Crimes Units, ces unités spécialisées composées de procureurs, d'enquêteurs, de policiers et d'autres experts spécialisés dans ce type d'affaires. Il faut également amener en justice les auteurs de crimes graves qui trouvent refuge ou sont de passage dans nos pays, ici en Occident, sur la base de la compétence universelle. Nous avons entendu un témoignage d'une survivante dans la salle qui avait demandé l'asile politique en Suisse et qui a entendu de l'une des femmes qui venait de Syrie, qui était dans le même centre de réfugiés, lui dire qu'elle avait croisé en Suisse son bourreau. Il faut également balayer devant nos portes l'hypocrisie qui consiste à dire qu'il faut impérativement juger ces crimes alors que l'on exporte des armes, alors que des sociétés occidentales pillent les ressources naturelles et contribuent donc au conflit. Cette hypocrisie-là doit cesser. Il faut soutenir les ONG, notamment les ONG juridiques dont le travail s'inscrit dans la durée, sur le terrain, aux côtés des associations de victimes et des survivants. Les rares exemples de procès qui ont fonctionné découlent de ce modèle et c'est un petit peu un message aux bailleurs que je lance là. Et enfin, parfois, il faut savoir aussi entendre les bonnes nouvelles. Et nous avons eu dans la salle un témoignage qui, moi, personnellement, m'est allé droit au cœur. Celui de la psychologue d'une survivante de Bosnie, violée alors qu'elle avait 16 ans, et que mon organisation soutient et défend depuis des années. Vendredi dernier, l'un des auteurs de ces actes a été condamné en Bosnie devant la Cour d'État à Sarajevo à 12 ans de prison. Et cette psychologue a eu ce mot qui, pour nous, les activistes, nous remplit d'une énergie folle et nous pousse à continuer. Ce mot tout simple que j'aimerais vous restituer à vous, tous ceux qui sont prêts à se lever et à parler, simplement ce mot, c'était « merci ».
Merci, Philippe. Esther, now can you please tell us about the key messages on reparation?
Yes, that would be my pleasure. So the hashtag for our panel was reparations now. And I would like you to use that hashtag later on. I think it summarizes really the urgency that we all felt in our panel, that there is no time to lose. We cannot afford letting generations of survivors wait without access to reparations. And I think that is something that is a major development. But probably a few years ago, if we would have been sitting here, we wouldn't even be talking about reparations. At least not to the extent that the topic has been coming back systematically, I think, in many of the other discussions too. Survivors in our panel really expressed the utmost urgency as well for them to start on reparations immediately. For them it's hugely important in addressing stigma and to help them regain some sense of dignity. The two components of reparations were extensively emphasized, and that is, on the one hand, a recognition of the harm, which can be a symbolic recognition or it can be public recognition, and on the other hand, compensation some of the harm that they've suffered. Now, there's a lot of challenges that came about in the group, the main one being that currently reparations are very much tied in with with criminal justice proceedings. And I'm sure that it came back in the group of Philip Grant, but the reality is that the majority of survivors of sexual violence and conflict simply do not have access to justice at all at the moment. We highlighted some of the challenges in accessing justice, one being that the justice mechanisms, the courts are really established to deal with individual crimes rather than mass atrocities, especially at a national level. The issues of survivors not being able to identify the perpetrator, not having proof that they've been raped, proof that would hold in court. And another issue raised was the political, so that the fact that in an aftermath of a conflict, the public systems are often in hands of the regime that was actually part of the sexual, in committing the crimes or condoning the crimes. Another big obstacle with reparations is political will. It's really simple. There's no political will. There's very little political will. And that is where people felt the international community can actually make a big difference. There's also not enough funding, that's clear. When we talk about sexual violence and conflict, it's often been about prevention and response. But reparation is really underfunded. It's not so much humanitarian aid, it's not so much development, might be somewhere in between. So that's something that needs to be explored further. And in short, I think what was the main idea for solutions, it is let's be creative. Let's start thinking about new ways, other outside the traditional, outside the criminal justice mechanism, to award reparations to survivors of sexual violence. Some good practice was highlighted, for example, in Kosovo, where a administrative reparation system has been established that awards survivors of sexual violence a monthly pension. And the good thing about that situation is that it's been established with serious, meaningful survivor participation, which is an important lesson because there's also examples around the world where it's been tried to put up reparation mechanisms, but they had negative side effects, for example, adding to stigma, which was highlighted in the group, because of a lack of survivor participation. I'm going to finish, because my second round, I'll be so short that I give myself another 20 seconds now. We talked about one idea, and that is the international reparations initiatives. And that is the idea whereby we hope to establish a mechanism which would unite multiple stakeholders, the UN, different states, survivors, very importantly, civil society, and the private sector in collectively mobilizing funds to support reparation programs, but also to really push governments to take reparations seriously. Thank you, Esther.
So this forum is a lot about innovation. Professor Yunus, you were at the panel on innovative technology and financing. Can you please tell us about the main takeaway?
Well, the technology is something that is at our will. That technology has gone such a high speed now, continuously running at an exponential rate to grow. So it's a question of what kind of technology we want. Most often we use the technology which has been developed by somebody else and using it to solve the problem, and as a kind of a second round of use of it. So one idea would be to use technology, create technology for the purpose that we want, because technology is an enabler, so it can be done. So technology on financial side is also very important, how to make sure the financial world can gather speed in reaching out to the people who have been unreached. So that's one area that we can do. The other point that I would make that after listening to the discussion, the government role is well recognized, and we have voiced our concerns about their actions or inactions, and also legal issues, how it works. The one that I would emphasize, the individual person's initiative, that the individual also is a very important factor, is a very important force. That somehow we feel that we all demand things from others, we are not demanding from ourselves. So how to activate individuals, whoever he is or wherever she is, doesn't matter. Individual can activate in solving the problem that we have been discussing all around us. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yunus. So this morning, one of the workshops was also about sexual violence on migration routes, which is often underreported. So Nadine, can you please tell us a bit about the main messages of the workshop?
Thank you. Our workshop was very good. We had a lot of valid points, and I think almost everyone said the same thing. We recognized that there was issue on the journeys, that there were issues in the destination countries, that there were issues even from people when they were trying to leave the countries, and they are called people migrant. So what I tried to do is I've wrote some key messages from the things that I wanted to bring to you for this session. And what we said was that institutions that welcome migrants to provide appropriate service and do not facilitate further sexual exploitation, and frontline workers to receive proper training to ensure people are not further traumatized. We also talk about the destination country to respect international law. And I think we're referring to the Geneva Convention in regards to refugees. There are a lot of things in the law that are not being respected, even though many countries are signatory of that convention, but are closing to close their eyes on certain conventions. We mentioned that sexual violence is an issue that concerns all of us as human beings, and we have the responsibility to speak and raise our voices regarding these issues. And one panelist said that these girls who are forced to marry believe that you and I will educate them, send them to school to fulfill their dreams. And she was referring to the young girls who are forced to marry at an early age. And we said the vulnerability does not end on arrival and in a supposedly safe country, that the journey does not end until people have the legal right to stay in that country. And we talked about what it meant in the language of the survivor to arrive. Because many often people think that once you arrive to a safe country, it's the end of the journey. I think across our session, it was mentioned a lot of times that there are challenges in the refugee camps, there are challenges in asylum in hostels that welcome refugee and migrants, and we needed to address these issues. It was mentioned during the workshop that some migrants are forced to sexual exploitation because there are not actual institutions that are following them through, that have the good services to protect them. And one of the reasons for that is because of the lack of resources. And we also talked about hostel. I mean, I think I remember, because I come from the DRC, and I went to seek refuge in the UK, and I used to live in an hostel, and I remember that in the hostel, a lot of girls were forced to sexual exploitation because there was not adequate funding or the right support for asylum seekers. And I think a lot of people make a lot of comment in regards to that. And also, I wanted to say, what does it mean in the language of the survivor that I have arrived to that supposedly safe country? We say that I arrive when my country of refuge will allow me to stay. I arrive when I can receive appropriate treatment. I arrive when I'm rehabilitated to choose my path and I'm given a voice.
Thank you, Nadine. And finally, we move to the last workshop that was entitled Know the System, Fix the System. So Céline, can you tell us a bit about the issues that emerged during this workshop?
Yes, thank you. I have to say I had to leave before the end of the workshop. I see Kim over there. So you can add something if I miss. But the idea was to discuss, okay, what is the system? What are we talking about? And then once we know what we are talking about, this is how we're going to be able to fix it. So we discussed about how you define fragile environment, how you define, sexual violence, and there was already lots of discussion, but what we could see was the lack, actually, of accurate and enough data to be able to measure the scope of sexual violence in conflict and fragile environments, so there is a need to work on that. I mentioned that we are not weapons of war. We are preparing to launch a global study on this question that we will do with
partners, but I think it's very important. We also addressed what I found very interesting, the position of a private company, and there was ArcelorMittal, and it was very interesting to see how companies who are having activities in some countries where, you know, supposedly you can have this kind of problems, how they put in place measure, and I think it was a very interesting example, how they have developed a system with criteria to ensure that they will not be working with extractive mineral companies that are, you know, exploiting people or using sexual violence, or at least not intervening on this. Yeah, we discussed also of the good practice, and I was also listening to what you were saying on how all the time we know what shouldn't be. Like, we know that there are programs that also don't really work because they are not adapted to the context. We talk a lot about training our program, but because we don't either know what we are talking about, or we don't really have a good idea of the context we are in, then we need really to innovate and to have other kind of approach today with the support, the program we are developing, be it in care, in justice, and all of this. And I want to outline something, because there was Elise Bogossian, I don't know if she's here, but Elise Bogossian was here, who created Elise Care, and she had a very strong testimony, very interesting about her job on the field. She had this question that I couldn't answer, actually, but I think the question posed was very interesting, saying, as a humanitarian, she works in Syria and Iraq with, you know, minorities, like, how can we really be useful with our Western eyes and ensure that, you know, we provide the good response, that we face different culture, different ways also on approaching sexual violence, for example. So I think this, the statement was very interesting. So this is what we talked about.
Thank you, Céline.
I was too long, maybe.
So now moving from identifying challenges to concrete solutions. Philippe, on a identifié donc les meilleures pratiques, les initiatives qui sont porteuses de succès. Si on se déplace à un niveau un peu plus politique, un peu plus global, quelles sont, selon vous, les opportunités ?
Il y en aurait une que j'aimerais partager avec vous. Hier, le docteur Mukwege, vous en souvenez, a parlé de cette ligne rouge que l'on devrait réussir à tracer en matière de violence sexuelle. En réalité, juridiquement, cette ligne rouge, elle existe déjà. Elle est parfois très fine, elle est souvent peu visible, mais elle existe. En réalité, ce qu'on devrait faire, c'est sortir un bon gros marqueur et tracer clairement la délimitation entre ce qui est acceptable, admissible, de ce qui est inacceptable et criminel. Pour cela, une initiative internationale forte et peu coûteuse est nécessaire. Pourquoi un État, au hasard le Luxembourg, ou un groupe d'États ne prendrait-il pas l'initiative, à l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies, de solliciter de la Cour internationale de justice, la plus haute cour des Nations unies, qu'elle rende un avis consultatif complet et exhaustif relatif aux obligations des États en matière de prévention, de répression et de réparation des crimes de violence sexuelle. Un tel avis consultatif pourrait couvrir des sujets variés, comme par exemple l'admissibilité des amnisties et des immunités nationales, l'obligation de former les juges et les procureurs pour qu'ils puissent mener à bien les procédures judiciaires, l'obligation de poursuivre en dehors de chez eux, sur la base de la compétence universelle, les auteurs de ces crimes. La Cour pourrait intervenir en matière de stigmatisation, en exigeant par exemple d'abolir les lois qui considèrent les survivantes comme ayant commis le crime d'adultère, ou qui demanderaient d'abolir ces lois absurdes qui considèrent que le témoignage d'une femme ne vaut pas le témoignage d'un homme. La Cour pourrait également déterminer quand les États doivent renvoyer, démobiliser ou ne pas promouvoir les responsables militaires impliqués dans ces crimes et les empêcher de revenir en grâce. La Cour pourrait être amenée à dire à quelles conditions des États tiers peuvent ou non vendre des armes qui serviront aux armées commettant ces violations. La Cour pourrait enfin dire en matière de réparation les soins minimums que les États doivent fournir et comment intégrer les principales personnes concernées dans tout schéma de réparation qui serait à créer. Ne serait-il pas fascinant que la plus haute cour mondiale définisse enfin, à l'issue d'une procédure publique médiatisée, ce que les États doivent entreprendre et ce qu'ils ne peuvent plus faire? Nous aurions enfin là notre bon gros marqueur rouge nous permettant de tenir responsables les États qui ne préviennent pas, qui ne répriment pas et qui ne réparent pas les violences sexuelles.
Merci Philippe. Esther, we heard and we discussed survivors-led initiatives during these 2 days. How can we foster survivors' participation?
Yes, I will answer that question, but maybe I would then first like to take the opportunity to address a few words to the SEMA network, and that's the global network of victims and survivors to end wartime sexual violence. I can't see you very well because I'm seeing mostly light, but I know you're here. And I just want to express my admiration and my gratefulness for going through this journey together. We've been working together now for 2 years. A lot of things have changed. It's been a privilege, I think, but also a very important learning process to see your individual journeys of healing while at the same time developing activism. I'm really, really impressed with what you mean for each other and how you support each other. And I think that sends out really a message to the world. Sean, I can see you. And I also want to thank you for being there as a supporting husband. And I think you, you deserve an applause. I'm really grateful that you were willing to be here. I know for you it was not an issue. It's not a matter of a favor. But I know that for the other survivors in the network, you also mean a lot because you are a message of support to all of them. And together, I'm sure with a lot of men in this room that are hopefully really going to work, if you're not already accomplished your positive masculinity that Dr. Mukwege spoke about. It's not always been an easy process. For some of you, you've really shown the will. You've made it clear that you wanted to speak out about your personal experiences. That was not easy, but it's something that you wanted, and I admire it. So moving then from that, I think when we talk about participation and survivor-led initiative, maybe one thing about participation, because it comes back in all the workshops now, the survivors need to be at the core of the initiatives. I think we need to take that really seriously. What does that mean? That doesn't mean consulting with survivors, no. That really means going back a bit to the 90s and doing true participatory community work. It's actually, we know how to do it, but just it seems that we've forgotten it a bit the last decade. Survivor-led initiatives. In the call to action, there is a reference to that. These survivors that are here are also connected, or they're representatives of networks of survivors in their own countries. And they do beautiful initiatives related to changing gender norms, related to care, peer support, collecting their history in their own terms. I think these projects need to be supported. It's not always easy. Sometimes they're not registered organizations, but let's make that effort to really look at survivor-led initiatives. Where there's a will, I would say there's a way. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Professor Yunus, Regarding innovative technology and financing, I would like to hear your thoughts about how to move forward, how to increase the use of these technologies and to obtain more financing for sexual violence.
Well, this has been a great conference, a great forum. This being the first forum, it brings all the knowledge accumulated over years. By the time we come to the action type program, we don't have time to finalize any action thing. So only we talk about the future actions. One idea that I could suggest that can you make it a series of forums or annual forum that get together and kind of see where we are, what we do, so that action programs start emerging. So this would be one. It doesn't have to be always Luxembourg. It could be some other place sometimes and come back to Luxembourg 2 years later, something like this. So the community that you have formed here is a very important community right now with sharing with all the experiences and so on. It will be a shame to let it go. So how to build it up, the emotionally ties, everybody felt with each other, and have face-to-face seeing each other, and then keep it going. It may not be a big one each year, but we still have to get together, see where we are, what happened, who's following what. So this is one. I would suggest that we continue as we go along. The second one is to create a fund out of this. Like Survivors Social Business Fund, so that all the things that we are talking about can be financed out of this fund as an action, as a fund, as a social business fund, meaning that this is something in a business format, not as a donations or a kind of writing check type of thing, which could be done separately. But this fund will be social business fund. People will come up, even the survivors will come up their own ideas, what kind of thing they do, so that kind of entrepreneurial activities all across, at the survivor level, at the people who are concerned about them, at their level, come out with the social business ideas, how they can, the diversity of it, it's amazing once you get into it. So if there is a fund created already, and that needs involvement of businesses, involvements of foundations, involvement of all the whatever sources that you can think about, they can put the money there. And this money, as a definition of social business, will keep coming back to the fund so that the fund can reuse the money again and again to achieve that. And forum can be an instrument where these designs will be presented and funding can be approved and designs can be discussed and so on. So this is another one. The second one, creation of a social business fund so that all the things that we are talking about. Third point is banking sector. How to open up the banking system, especially created packages for this kind of activities and so on, how to make that happen so it becomes part of their activity. It's not something that we are bringing outside. And Luxembourg being the global center for banking, I'm sure if they put their heads together, they can come up with some kind of structure where they can keep this happening. So these are the three things I would suggest that we pay attention to, see how to make it a continuing thing. It's not a one-stop thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yunus. And Nadine, according to you, what solutions have been identified during this forum?
I think we mentioned that survivor-centered solutions were important. And by that, I mean, I'm just giving one example. I'm part of this network called Survivor Speak Out Network. And in that network, in the UK, survivors advocate and bring recommendations on policies on matters that concern refugee and asylum seekers. We need to have survivors to be part of the solutions, to get them involved in the design of the process, and not just to have stories. I know stories are important. People need to hear these stories so that they are aware of what is happening. But we need the survivor to tell us, because they've been on that journey, to tell us how best to fix the system. And I can give you an example. Representing the network, we went to Malta, and we were invited by the European Asylum Commission to talk about the asylum interviewing process. And during that process, they wanted to design a new framework for interviewing people who were making asylum claim, especially torture survivors. We were able to bring recommendations, and I'm pleased to tell you that those recommendations were taken into account. So it would move the survivor from the victim position and put them in the empowerment position so that people do not just feel that the crime occurred for a reason and nothing happened afterward. But once you know you are able to fix the system, help someone have a better experience, I think that is very positive. And I would just want to say that initiative like this conference is already part of the solution because we've been raising our voices. The crime that happened, the sexual violence, is designed to silence people, and often people are not very confident to speak. But I'm very grateful to the Royal Highness for taking this initiative because it put the survivor at the center. As I can see, there are a lot of survivors who came from all over the world. I know the UK government is also taking initiative with the Preventing Sexual Violence Initiative. Many years ago when I came, we were not talking about these issues as much as I can see today. And the more we talk about it, the more the perpetrator will feel like they will be held to justice and there's an accountability waiting for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. Et maintenant, pour conclure, Céline, how do we fix the system? Quelques pistes pour améliorer le système.
Non, je ne peux pas répondre à ça. Non, mais je crois d'abord que oui, ce que vous proposez, je pense que c'est une très bonne idée qu'on continue, et je pense aussi que c'était votre idée de départ, puisque vous avez commencé par dire c'est un commencement. Et le commencement, c'est pas seulement ces moments-là, c'est un réseau, c'est se mettre ensemble, c'est voir comment on peut avancer mieux. Je crois aussi qu'aujourd'hui, on a, en tout cas pendant ces 2 jours, on a vu aussi que oui, il y avait des choses à préciser, qu'on n'avait pas assez de data, que peut-être parfois on ne savait pas assez bien de quoi on parlait, que la justice, elle ne fonctionne pas. Et je crois qu'à un moment, il faut le dire, qu'on parle, tu parlais, pardon Philippe, des juges, beaucoup de juges et d'avocats qui sont formés, mais moi je vois sur le terrain beaucoup de juges, d'avocats dans les pays qui sont formés, et je suis désolée, mais ça ne marche pas mieux. Je suis désolée. Donc ça veut dire qu'il y a un problème avec les programmes. Donc je pense qu'il faut innover sur la manière d'approcher les choses. Il faut prendre en compte le contexte. Et la dernière chose que je voulais dire aussi, c'est que je sais aujourd'hui que ces 2 jours étaient consacrés à la question des femmes. On est avec un réseau de survivantes. Je crois que Peter Maurer l'a dit, l'a souligné, la question du viol de guerre, elle est aussi... Elle concerne aussi les hommes et les garçons, et je crois que ça serait intéressant, et je promets là-dessus, que ça serait intéressant de peut-être après décliner aussi, par exemple, une question, je sais pas, la question des enfants et ceux du viol, la question, enfin moi qui m'intéresse aussi beaucoup les hommes, mais la question de l'innovation, mais des questions très précises sur lesquelles on pourrait travailler 1 journée, 2 journées, et vraiment venir avec des réponses concrètes, avoir un peu plus de temps à chaque fois, maintenant qu'on a défini une route. Voilà.
Merci Céline. Thank you to all our panelists, and I now invite Minister Asselborn to offer closing remarks.
Madame, Monseigneur, parfois il faut renverser le protocole. Chers invités, c'est très difficile pour moi de conclure parce que je n'étais pas là toute la journée d'hier et seulement une partie aujourd'hui. Mais je pourrais peut-être, si Madame la Grande-Duchesse le permet, dire quelques mots sur la genèse de cette initiative. Alors d'abord, on était tous les deux, il y a quelques années à Londres, donc c'était un truc organisé avec Angelina Jolie et Pete Brett. C'était donc... Brad Pitt, oui, bon, ben, vous le connaissez. Et c'était William Hague, donc mon collègue ministre des Affaires étrangères de la Grande-Bretagne, qui avait donc lancé cette initiative très importante sur aussi comment combattre la violence des femmes. Et la Grande-Duchesse m'a dit, je pense qu'on va faire quelque chose de similaire à Luxembourg, elle ne m'a pas dit quand, mais un peu plus grand qu'à Londres. Alors, je pense que c'était, Monseigneur, en automne 2016. Alors, le couple grand-ducal m'a invité en 2016. Et la grande-duchesse et moi, on était tellement en discussion pour trouver une date que c'était le grand-duc qui m'a servi mon poulet. Ça, je me rappelle très bien. Et enfin, on a trouvé une date. Donc, c'était 2018 au début. Au 2018, on a des élections. Et puis, la grande-duchesse, à un certain moment, a dit non, on va le faire en 2019. Alors, moi, j'étais d'accord avec tout parce qu'on avait des élections au mois d'octobre et je pensais que... Voilà. C'est pour ça que j'ai dit oui, oui, oui. Non. Mais maintenant, blague à part, je pense, Madame, vous avez montré que le Luxembourg, ce n'est pas seulement le pays de la finance, des sous, mais, enfin, surtout que ces sous ne nous appartiennent pas, mais c'est le pays qui a du cœur, et ça c'est le nôtre, ce cœur. Alors, je pense que c'est déjà un très grand honneur d'avoir 3 prix Nobel avec nous, des femmes et des hommes très importants dans la communauté internationale. Je ne vais pas tous les citer parce que je vais certainement en oublier, mais je pense, Madame, aujourd'hui, je peux le dire même au nom de notre gouvernement et de notre pays entier, vous avez montré qu'avec votre énergie et aussi avec votre ténacité, nous sommes capables de monter quelque chose de bien. Alors, la grande-duchesse est une personne... Enfin, je suis un peu cycliste quand je ne suis pas en fonction. Mais les cyclistes, quand ils sont fatigués, ils mangent des barres énergétiques. La grande-duchesse n'a pas besoin de manger des barres énergétiques parce qu'elle a de l'énergie. Et je pense qu'avec toute votre aide, tous ceux qui sont ici, vous avez fait quelque chose de remarquable pour ceux qui ont souffert énormément et qui souffrent peut-être énormément aussi en ce moment. Quand je suis entré, j'ai vu 2 jeunes femmes du Nigeria. C'était 2 femmes qui étaient parmi les premières à être donc captées par Boko Haram. Et à cette époque-là, j'étais assis au Conseil de sécurité, donc 2013-14, et ma voisine, c'était l'ambassadeur ou le ministre des Affaires étrangères du Nigeria, et je sais comment ce pays a souffert et comment vous, en tant que personne, avez souffert physiquement et évidemment aussi psychologiquement. Et donc, vous avez témoigné les 2 derniers jours, je l'ai vu aussi lors de ma courte présence, vous avez montré beaucoup de dignité et vous avez montré beaucoup d'humanité. Je suis d'un milieu qu'on appelle les politiques. Et donc, dans ce milieu-là, surtout pour l'instant, je dois dire même en Europe, ce n'était pas le cas quand j'ai commencé il y a 15 ans, mais aujourd'hui, que parfois, dans nos débats, nous manquons à la fois de dignité et aussi d'humanité. C'est grave. Bon, je voudrais, pour terminer, parce que, évidemment, que je suis limité dans le temps, comme tous les autres, et j'ai du respect pour votre programme, mais laissez-moi dire encore peut-être 2 mots, ou 3 mots. D'abord, l'impunité. Le Luxembourg est un des pays qui vraiment fait tout pour que l'impunité ne passe pas, pour qu'on organise vraiment, par tous les moyens, que les gens qui font des choses inacceptables soient aussi jugés. Deuxièmement, je voulais dire en ma fonction de ministre de l'Immigration, et surtout en 2015, mais aussi il y a quelques semaines encore, j'ai vu depuis 2015 beaucoup de camps de réfugiés. À Lesbos, à Lampedusa, aussi à Mossoul, près de Mossoul, en Kurdistan. J'étais il y a quelques jours au Tigré, c'est-à-dire à la frontière entre l'Éthiopie et l'Érythrée. Et là, ce qu'on voit dans tous ces camps, c'est les yeux des enfants qui démontrent une énorme tristesse, et on voit aussi les yeux des femmes. Et les yeux des femmes surtout, je pense qu'on voit qu'ils sont blessés, mais on voit aussi qu'ils ne résignent pas pour leurs enfants. Et c'est ça que, en tant que luxembourgeois, nous essayons avec les moyens dont nous disposons à faire tout ce qu'on peut faire pour ne pas tomber dans des solutions de facilité telles que nous les connaissons actuellement en Europe. L'Europe forteresse a été construite. On a fermé les frontières de l'Europe et on n'a pas réussi à mettre en œuvre la deuxième phrase, c'est-à-dire créer des migrations légales. Et c'est ça un grand, grand défi, je pense, pour l'Europe après, j'espère, après les votations pour le Parlement européen. Et puis, troisièmement, j'ai écouté ce que vous avez dit, monsieur, je suis d'accord avec tout, mais laissez-moi dire pour terminer que nous devons tout faire, tout, pour que dans ce monde tel que nous le connaissons maintenant, la Cour pénale internationale puisse fonctionner sans pression, sans que la puissance la plus importante terrestre sur la planète fasse des pressions, des menaces sur les juges et sur les procureurs qui travaillent pour la Cour pénale internationale. Merci.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our panelists and Minister Asselborn. And I now give the floor to our Master of Ceremony.
Thank you very much. I let you get back to your seats, even if we still have a lot to say about the workshops. Thank you very much.